The sword entered his body on live television. Not metaphorically, not in reconstruction, live, in front of cameras, in front of an audience, in front of the entire nation of Japan watching their television sets on the afternoon of October 12, 1960. Inejiro Asanuma was 61 years old. He was the leader of the Japan Socialist Party, the most prominent opposition politician in the country, a barrel-chested, powerful man known for speeches that shook halls and a voice that could fill a stadium without a microphone. He was standing at a podium in Hibiya Hall in Tokyo, mid-sentence in a televised political debate, when a 17-year-old boy in a school uniform ran onto the stage from the right side and drove a yoroi doshi, a traditional Japanese short sword, into his left side with both hands. The cameras caught everything. The sword entered. Asanuma lurched. The boy withdrew the blade and drove it a second time. Asanuma fell. He was dead within minutes. The boy was wrestled to the ground by security and staff. He did not resist. He stood very still as they grabbed him, as if the act of running onto that stage had used the last of whatever had been propelling him forward, and now there was simply nothing left. His name was Otoya Yamaguchi. He was a member of a far-right ultra-nationalist group. He had planned this for weeks. And the footage, 17 seconds of footage that cameras captured before anyone could move to stop it, became one of the most disturbing political documents of the 20th century. 17 seconds. The time it takes to end a democracy's conversation with itself. To understand what happened on that stage in 1960, you need to understand what Japan was in 1960 and what Inejiro Asanuma represented to the people who loved him and to the people who wanted him dead. Japan in 1960 was a country in violent argument with itself. 15 years after the end of World War II, the wounds of defeat, occupation, and transformation had not fully healed. The American occupation had ended in 1952, but American military bases remained across the country under the terms of the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty, the UNPO Treaty, as the Japanese called it. The treaty was up for renewal in 1960, and the renewal had split Japan along fault lines that went deeper than ordinary political disagreement. On one side, the Liberal Democratic Party government of Prime Minister Nobusuke Kishi, which supported the treaty renewal and pushed it through the Diet in circumstances that critics called procedurally illegitimate, a midnight vote with opposition members physically excluded from the chamber. Kishi himself was a controversial figure. He had been a minister in the wartime cabinet, had been arrested as a Class A war crimes suspect after the war, and had been released and rehabilitated in the early Cold War period as the Americans decided that reliable anti-communist allies mattered more than wartime accountability. On the other side, a massive popular protest movement, the UNPO struggle, that brought hundreds of thousands of people into the streets of Tokyo in the largest demonstrations in Japanese post-war history. Students, workers, intellectuals, people who believed the treaty renewal represented a permanent entanglement with American military power that would make Japan complicit in American Cold War operations across Asia. And standing at the center of the opposition, larger than life, was Inejiro Asanuma. Asanuma had built his political career on a particular brand of left-wing nationalism that was simultaneously anti-American imperialism and anti-Soviet. He had made a famous, some said infamous, speech in Beijing in 1959 in which he declared that American imperialism was the common enemy of China and Japan. The speech had made him a hero to the left and a traitor to the right. It had placed him on the radar of ultra-nationalist groups that had been part of Japanese political life since before the war and had never entirely gone away. He knew he was hated by these groups. He continued anyway. On the morning of October 12, 1960, he arrived at Hibiya Hall for a televised debate between the leaders of Japan's three major parties, a nationally broadcast event, formal and significant, the kind of political occasion that was supposed to demonstrate that Japan's post-war democracy was functioning. In the audience, in a school uniform, with a sword concealed beneath his jacket, Otoya Yamaguchi was waiting. He had purchased the sword specifically for this occasion. The debate had been running for approximately 30 minutes. Asanuma was at the podium, speaking. The cameras were on him. NHK, the national broadcaster, was transmitting live. The hall was full. The other party leaders were seated at the table behind him. Yamaguchi was in the audience section to the right of the stage. He had been sitting quietly. He was 17 years old, slightly built, dressed in the standard uniform of a Japanese high school student. Nobody had searched him, nobody had questioned him. He had a ticket. He sat where people sit at political events and waited. At approximately 3:05 p.m., Asanuma reached a passage in his speech about Japan's political situation. Yamaguchi stood up. He moved quickly toward the stage, not running yet, walking fast, with the particular focus of someone who has decided something and is in the process of executing the decision before the decision can be reconsidered. He reached the edge of the stage. He climbed up. He ran across the stage toward Asanuma. Security personnel began moving, too late, too slow, the distance too short and the intention too sudden for anyone to intercept. Asanuma turned. He saw the boy coming. He had approximately 1 second. The sword entered his left side. A photographer named Yasushi Nago, covering the event for GG Press, captured the moment on film. Asanuma at the podium, the boy beside him, the sword embedded in his body. Asanuma's face in the specific expression of a man absorbing something his mind cannot yet process. The photograph won the Pulitzer Prize. The cameras kept rolling. Yamaguchi withdrew the blade. He drove it in again. Asanuma fell, clutching the podium, pulling it down with him. The hall erupted. Yamaguchi stood still. He had approximately 30 seconds before security reached him, 30 seconds in which he made no attempt to flee, no attempt to use the sword again, no attempt to do anything except stand where he was. He was taken to the ground and restrained. He did not resist. Otoya Yamaguchi was taken to a juvenile detention facility in Tokyo. He was 17 years old. He was a member of the Dai Nippon Ikokusha, Greater Japan Patriotic Party, a far-right organization whose ideology drew on pre-war ultra-nationalist traditions, on the cult of imperial loyalty, on a version of Japanese identity that defined itself against foreign influence and against the domestic left that it saw as the agent of that influence. The investigators who questioned him found a boy who was coherent, calm, and apparently without regret. He explained his reasoning with the particular clarity of someone who had thought about something for a long time and had arrived at a conclusion he found internally consistent. He said that Asanuma was a traitor. He said that someone had to act. He said he had been prepared to die for what he had done. He was not sentenced to death. He was 17. Under Japanese law, he was processed through the juvenile justice system, which meant detention, evaluation, and a legal framework designed for rehabilitation rather than punishment. 3 weeks after the assassination, on November 2, 1960, Otoya Yamaguchi was found dead in his cell. He had used toothpaste to write on his cell wall. The message, written in Japanese, read, "7 lives for my country," a reference to a famous saying attributed to a 14th century samurai loyalist. He had torn his sheet into strips and hanged himself. He was 17 years old. The investigation into how a minor had obtained a sword and entered a nationally televised political debate with it raised questions about Japanese security arrangements that were deeply uncomfortable. The answers were unsatisfactory. He had bought the sword, he had bought a ticket, he had sat down. Nobody had stopped him because the systems in place had not been designed to stop someone like him, a quiet boy in a school uniform who did not appear to be anything other than what he appeared to be. In the right-wing press and in ultra-nationalist circles, Yamaguchi was treated as a martyr almost immediately. His photograph, the serious face of a teenage boy in uniform, was reproduced and distributed. His final message was quoted. He was given, in these circles, exactly the heroic death narrative he had apparently sought. In the broader Japanese public, the reaction was horror and a specific national shame. The shame of a country that had just watched its democracy produce a political assassination on live television in a hall meant to demonstrate that Japanese politics had moved beyond the violence of the pre-war period. It had not moved beyond it. It had just filmed it. Inejiro Asanuma was pronounced dead at the hospital he was taken to after leaving Hibiya Hall. He had been stabbed twice with a traditional sword on a stage in front of cameras. The entire sequence from Yamaguchi's approach to Asanuma's fall had taken 17 seconds. There was no trial. The assassin was dead before he could be tried as an adult. The investigation concluded. The files were closed. The AMPO Treaty was ratified. The renewal Asanuma had spent his final years opposing became law. Prime Minister Kishi resigned shortly after, not because of the assassination, but because of the political damage from the treaty controversy. He was replaced. The Liberal Democratic Party remained in power as it had since 1955 and as it would for decades more. The debate continued. The television footage was archived. The sword was entered into evidence. Then the sword was placed in storage, and Japan moved on, in the particular way that countries move on from political trauma, which is to say, publicly, with ceremony, and not entirely.